afternoon, guys. So we are going to continue our discussion of probability today with conditional probability. But before we actually do the math, I want you to think about what the word condition means, okay? So I'm sure at some point in your life, your parents or your grandparents or whoever you live with has looked at you and said, you can do this, but, or you can go here, but. Whatever comes after the word but, that's the condition. Okay, it's sort of like a rule you have to follow, or it's something that you have to agree to before you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. Okay, it works the same way in math. So if you look at example 1, it says we've got a list of 10 numbers here, 1 through 10. We are going to select a single number randomly, and we want to find some probabilities about that number. So part A says, what's the probability of selecting the number 3 given that you are choosing an odd number? Okay? So here's what that means. Given that you are choosing an odd number, that's my condition right there. That's my rule. If I'm going to choose a number, it has to be odd. So look at what that changes when I write my probability out. I am only looking at odd numbers. So the bottom of my fraction is not going to be 10. There are only 5 of these numbers that are odd. So the bottom of my fraction is going to be a 5. Out of those 5, how many of them are the number 3? Well, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Only one of those is a 3. So the probability of selecting the number 3, given that you are choosing an odd number, is 1 out of 5, not 1 out of 10. Okay? Take a look at part B. This one's written a little bit different, but that line right there still represents given. Whatever comes after it is the rule that you have to follow. Okay? It's the bottom of your fraction. So part B is saying, find the probability of selecting a 2-digit number given that it's an even number. Well, how many even numbers do we have up here? Because that's my condition. Only 5 of them. So the bottom of my fraction is going to be 5. The bottom of your fraction is always whatever comes after the line. Out of those 5, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are my 5 even numbers, how many are 2 digits? Only one of them. So the probability of selecting a 2-digit number, given that it's an even number, is 1 out of 5. Okay, part C says this. What's the probability that the number you pick starts with a consonant? Okay, and just to remind you of what a consonant is, you have vowels, you have A, E, I, O, U. Everything else is a consonant. So what's the probability of picking something that starts with a consonant, given that it's an odd number? So again, what's my condition? My condition is that it has to be odd. Well, there's only 5 of those, so the bottom of my fraction is going to be 5. Out of those 5 odd numbers, so 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and I'll underline those. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Out of just those 5 numbers, how many of them, if I spelled them out, start with a consonant? Well, 1 starts with an O, that's a vowel, so that doesn't count. 3 starts with a T, that's a consonant. 5 starts with an F, that's a consonant. 7 starts with an S, that's a consonant. 9 starts with an N, that's a consonant. So out of those 5, 4 of them start with a consonant. So the probability of choosing a number that starts with a consonant, given that it's odd, is 4 out of 5. Now we can also do conditional probability with a table. So part A says, what's the probability of choosing a hardback book given that it is fiction? So what's my condition? It has to be a fiction book. And it may help you to do this if you're printing stuff out on paper. I always mark the column that I'm looking at. If it says given that it's fiction, those are the only 3 numbers that are allowed to appear in my fraction. Okay? So how many total fiction books are there? Well, there's 11 of them. Okay? So 11 is going to be the bottom of my fraction. Out of just those 11, how many are hardback? Well, 3. And there's my fraction. So if you notice here, if you circle what you're looking at, you're not tempted to look at any of the other numbers. It's not 8 out of 11. I realize there's 8 total hardback books, but we were told that our condition was that it had to be a fiction book. So therefore, we are only looking at the 3 hardback books that happen to be fiction. Okay? Let's look at letter B. Find the probability that something is nonfiction given that it's a paperback. And be careful here. Look at what comes after the line, paperback. So paperback is the only thing that I am allowed to look at. It's my condition. So I'm going to circle all the paperback books. And they fall right here. Those are the only 3 numbers that can appear in my fraction. So there are 12 total paperback books. Out of just those 12, how many are nonfiction? Well, 4 of them are. Okay? And 4 out of 12 will reduce to 1/3. The biggest mistake I see people make is they'll say 9 out of 12. So they know that paperback goes on the bottom. They'll put a 12 there. But it's not the total number of nonfiction. It's the nonfiction books that fall in that paperback row that goes on top. Okay? And one more. Part C says, what is the probability that you choose a paperback book given that it's fiction? So what am I looking at here? Well, the word that comes after the line is fiction. So I am only allowed to look at the fiction books. Only those 11. So the bottom of my fraction is going to have an 11 on it. Okay? And now I say, okay, out of those 11, so just this column, how many are paperback? Well, 8 of them are. And then you're done right there. You can change them to a decimal if you want to, but you don't have to. So that should be enough to go ahead and get you started on today's assignment. Please let me know if you have questions.